Okay, I really do like that version of the song. Welcome in, everyone. I hope you've had a good week. Yes, I'm using the new model now. So, how has everyone been doing? I didn't even read the trivia. How did... Okay, yeah, it's just reversed Alexander. That's weird. Where did the Nexo click? But we are going to get back into reading The Mummy tonight. I will try to get at least 2 chapters read because it is a very long book. Though originally it was like 3 smaller volumes, but the book I have is all 3 of them together. But yeah. Let's see, everything seems to be working so far. Let me check. Process. Why is my processor at 100? Oh, there it goes. That's going down. Processor's at in the 70s. That's good. You guys can see where my processor's at right now. See, I've been having to be really careful watching that because I do not know... Oh, my phone just fell over. Though I'm not using the phone for camera tracking, I'm using it to watch kittens on my porch. Because I watch kittens on my porch. And it fell over again. I'm not using a stand, I just have it propped up. But, you know, gotta watch kittens. Hey, Jiva. Yeah, we're going to be reading more of The Mummy, the 22nd century tale. Ugh, can't speak right. You can tell it's going to be one of those nights. But yeah, processor's staying fairly good right now. I think I'm going to have to start turning off my computer for at least half an hour to let it cool off before streams, just to see if I can maintain it being a little bit better. Because I'm one of those people who tends to leave the computer running 24/7. And I probably shouldn't, but I'll shut it down maybe an hour a day, just clean it. Still not used to having a high performance computer, so I have to do more work and have to get used to it and such. Hey, at least my closed caption is a little bit more accurate tonight. But anyway, let's go over to study. And I think I found a way of finally do a page turn. I just haven't tried doing the art for it yet. Because apparently you can set it up as a grayscale transition, and then it'll follow however the grayscale is done. So if I get on one of my computers that actually has a working version of the ancient Photoshop that is not AI linked, I will try to make one. I have no idea what happened to my Photoshop CD. I hopefully did not leave it in the computer I donated. But that was also like a computer I got for $25 to see if I could fix, and I couldn't do anything with it. It was actually older than my other tower. But anyway, now I need to add another item to the scene just so it looks like I'm looking at something instead of just staring down. I also feel like I need to raise my chair. Ugh. Okay, now I'm at level with the camera again. Let's see, it is 9:07. I guess I could start reading early. I love the fact that my closed caption is actually being accurate today. It's not happened often enough. My CPU's down in the 50s. This is actually cooperating. Let's say that, then it spikes up to 78. Anyway. So, everyone here, feel free to settle back, relax, and we will read this 200-year-old book about the 22nd century. God, that's such a weird notion. This book story is from 1827. So the stuff I'm reading is 198 years old. I will never get over the fact that I will find this kind of stuff. But anyway, let's get into the story. Chapter 3. When Edric and Entwerfen reached Sir Ambrose, they found Father Morris at his side, explaining with his usual promptness, and clearness the meaning of the different signs of the telegraph. "My dear Edric," exclaimed Sir Ambrose, throwing himself into the arms of his son. "My dear, dear Edric, your brother has gained the battle. The Germans are completely overthrown. He has taken their king and several of their princes prisoners, and the fine province of France is ceded to us entirely." "I am rejoiced to hear it," cried Edric, returning his father's embrace with emotion. "And I hope he is safe?" "I hope so too," replied Sir Ambrose, "though he says nothing of himself. But now you know Edmund. Our troops won this, our army gained that. The soldiers fought bravely. He never speaks of himself. To hear him relate a battle, nobody would imagine that he had ever had anything to do with it." "It's too dark to see anymore," said Father Morris, who had been for some time watching the telegraph, but now turned from it in despair. "The machine is still in motion, but it is too dark for me to decipher what it means." The attention of all present was directed to the sky as he spoke. It was indeed become of pitchy blackness. The general gloom seemed to hang over the face of nature. The birds flew twittering for shelter. A low wind moaned through the trees, and in short, everything seemed to portend a storm. "We had better return to the house," said Dr. Edward, looking around with something like fear at these alarming indications, for his heated imagination had not yet quite recovered the effect of the awful speculations he had so lately been indulging in. "What is a black spot there? I declare it moves! Good heavens, what can it be?" "Really, Doctor," replied Adelard, "you provoke the action of my risible vexillities. The opaque body which you perceived at a little distance, at which seems to have been occasioned such a fearful excitement of your nervous system, is only a living specimen of Corvus Genus, who has probably descended upon earth to search for his vermicular repast." "I beg your pardon, Mr. Abelard," rejoined Mr. Davis, speaking with his usual precision, "but according to my humble apprehension, you'll labor under a slight mistake as to the particular. The feathered biped has so forcibly attracted your attention appears to me not one of the corvi, but rather one of the graculae, a variety of extremely rare occurrence in the vicinity, and which are sometimes called incendera avis, for their unfortunate propensity to the habitations of combustion. By picking up small pieces of phosphinated carbon and carrying them in their beaks to the combination of straw and the other materials, sometimes piled upon the apex of a house to defend it from the inroads of provocity. It is of no use, sighed Sir Ambrose, who, straining his eyes to endeavor to decipher the movements of the telegraph, the outlines of which only now appeared, stamped as if in jet, and strongly relieved the gray sky beyond. It is of no use, reiterated Father Morris, and the whole party were preparing to retire, when suddenly a vivid light flashed upon them from the hill, and instantly a long line of torches seemed to stream along the horizon. "He is coming home! But will he write more tomorrow?" exclaimed the whole party simultaneously, for they knew well by experience the meaning of this signal. "He is coming home, thank God!" repeated Sir Ambrose, his pallid lips quivering, and every limb trembling with agitation. "Look to my father," cried Edric. "He will faint." "Oh, no, no," repeated Sir Ambrose. "Thank God, thank God!" "Well, lean upon me at least," said Edric affectionately. Sir Ambrose complied, and, supported by his son, still gazed anxiously on the torches, their red glare shedding the unnatural light around them, and making the surrounding darkness only appear still more intense. Thunder growled in the distance, and rain began to fall in large drops, yet still Sir Ambrose gazed upon the torches, and could not be persuaded to leave the terrace. These wild, fearful-looking lights, gleaming through the tempest, seemed a connection link between him and his darling son, and it was not till they were obscured by the thick, heavy rain, and even the outline of the telegraph vanished in the gathering clouds around, that he could be induced to seek for shelter. Sir Ambrose slept little that night. The sleep of age is easily broken, and perhaps the joyful agitation of his spirits had produced a slight access of fever. He rose with the dawn, and long before the rest of his family had descended, summoned Abelard, that he might dispatch him to inform his most intimate friend, the Duke of Cornwall, of the news. "Oh," he said, as soon as the drowsy butler made his appearance, "I'm sure the Duke feels nearly as great an interest in the success of Edmund as myself, and will not be displeased if he is disturbed a little earlier than usual upon such an occasion." "I obey," replied Adelard. "I will shake off my sullen propensities, and speed with the velocity of the electric fluid to the castle of the noble chieftain." "Take heed you do not forget your message, by the way," repeated Sir Ambrose, smiling. "Not all the waters of the Lethe could wash such magnificent tidings from my memory," replied the butler. "Your honour's words are imprinted upon the magnetic organ of my brain, and the sensorium must be derived from my cerebellum ere they can be effaced." The Duke of Cornwall had been an intimate friend of Sir Ambrose almost from infancy. They had been companions at school and at college, besides which, peculiar circumstances which had happened in their youth had linked them together in indissoluble ties. What these circumstances were, however, no one exactly knew, except for the parties concerned, and they always avoided alluding to them. All that was generally understood upon the subject being that Sir Ambrose had, in some manner, been instrumental in saving the Duke's life, but how, when, or where, was never clearly explained. The Duke of Cornwall was of the royal family of England, and closely allied to the throne. His father had been brother to that prince who had so steadfastly refused the crown when it was offered to him by the ambassadors from the people, and as that prince left no male descendants, the Duke might be considered legitimately entitled to reign. The thought of disturbing by his claims the female dynasty now established had, however, never entered into his head that he would marry his daughter Elvira to Edmund Montague, and his niece Rosabella to Edric. He turned all his thoughts, plans, and wishes to the accomplishment of this object, and suffered no other idea to interfere with it. Those, however, who were acquainted with the characters of the young people thought the Duke had quite reversed the natural order of things by this arrangement, and that the strong mind and haughty spirit of Rosabella would have suited better the ambitious Edmund, whilst the soft, yielding disposition and feminine graces of Elvira seemed to harmonize exactly with the taste of the philosophic Edric. No persuasions, however, could induce the Duke to deviate in the slightest degree from his design. Like many of the higher classes of society in those days of universal education, he affected an excessive plainness and simplicity in his language, so much so, indeed, as sometimes almost to degenerate into rudeness, in order that he might be clearly distinguished from the elaborate and scientific expressions of the vulgar, and when urged upon the subject of those intended marriages, he would roughly say, "Don't talk to me, there's nothing like a little contradiction in the married life. If two people were to agree to live together, who were always of the same opinion, they would die of ennui in 6 months. No, no, I'm right, and so they'll find it in the end." He would then shake his head and put on such a look of positive determination that his friends would generally retire in silence, feeling it perfectly in vain to attempt to alter his resolution. As to consulting the inclinations of the young people themselves, the idea never entered his imagination. "Children don't know what's good for them," he would reply sharply, if anyone presumed to suggest such a thought, "and it is the duty of parents and guardians to decide in such matters." Sir Ambrose, wishing the connection for his sons and respecting even the whims of his friend, had as yet never interfered, and the young people had also appeared silently to acquiesce. Rebellious spirits, however, were hidden under the apparent calm, and the Duke was soon to learn from experience that human beings were rather more difficult to manage than a drove of turkeys, a flock of sheep, a fact of which he had not known the slightest suspicion. The Duke had already risen, and was in his garden when the messenger of Sir Ambrose arrived panting for breath, and quite exhausted from the velocity which, as he expressed it, he had employed in endeavouring to execute with the utmost expedition the implied wishes of his master. The Duke was surprised to see him. "What brings you so early, Abelard?" demanded he. "Oh, your grace," replied the butler, gasping for utterance, "the haste I have made was impeded my respiration, and the blood, finding the pulmonary artery free, rushes with such force along the arterial canal to the aorta that I'm in imminent danger of being suffocated." "Pshaw!" said the Duke. "Besides," continued Edward, "a saline secretion distills from every pore of my skin, and a serious transmutation from the excessive exertions I have made use of." "And what has occasioned these violent exertions?" "The earnest desire experienced by Sir Ambrose to transmit with all the expedition possible to your grace the intelligence he has just received from the acquisition of a victory from Master Edmund in the hostile territory of Germany." "Victory!" shouted the Duke. "Victory! Rosabella! Elvira! Where are you girls? Here's tidings to rouse you from your slumbers. And how is he, Adelaide? Is the boy safe? God bless him. Victory will be nothing to us if we are to lose him." "It occasions me excessive chagrin," replied Abelard, "that I am totally unable to resolve that interrogatory to your grace's complete satisfaction. Taciturnity, however, upon such subjects is, I believe, generally considered synonymous with prosperity, and as Master Edmund, to the best of my credence, conveyed no information relative to his sanity in the communication made by him to his paternal ancestor, I humbly opine that there are no reasonable grounds for supposing it has suffered any material deterioration in consequence of the late sanguinary encounter in which he has been engaged." God, this butler. The Duke had not patience to wait for the conclusion of his speech, but hobbled away as fast as infirmities would permit, reciprocating for Elvira and Rosabella in a voice that he might have silenced Stunner, and Adelard, finding himself alone, was fain to follow his example, marveling as he went along, however, at the excessive impatience of the fiery spirits of the age, which would not permit people to remain stationary, even to hear what he called compendious replication to the very questions which they themselves had propounded. Whatever faults might fall to the share of the Duke of Cornwall, that of a cold heart was certainly not amongst the number, The delight he felt on hearing Edmund's triumph could not have been greater if the youthful hero had been his own son. His eyes, indeed, absolutely sparkled with transport when he communicated the intelligence to his niece and daughter, and his tidings were not bestowed upon insensible ears, for the breasts of both of the youthful auditors throbbed with pleasure at the news, though the causes of their emotions were different. Elvira had been the idol of Edmund's homage from her childhood. She fancied she returned his passion with equal fervor, but she deceived herself, as love was yet a stranger to her heart. Endowed with great beauty and superior talents, accustomed from her earliest infancy to be worshipped by all around her, surrounded by flatterers till even flattery itself had lost its charm, Elvira was as yet insensible to love. Why she was so, we leave to the philosophers to explain. We merely state facts, and leave others to draw conclusions. Rosabella's character was essentially different from that of her cousin. Passion was the essence of her existence, and her dark eyes flashed the fire that bespoke the intensity of her feelings. She loved Edmund, but though she loved him with all of the overwhelming violence that only a soul like hers could feel, yet she would not have scrupled to sacrifice even him to her revenge, if she had thought he treated her with negligence or contempt. She scorned the opinion of the world, and regarded mankind in general but as slaves, whom she should honor by trampling beneath her feet. Ambition, however, was her leading passion, and even her love for Edmund struggled in vain for mastery against her. The feeling was now highly gratified by the tidings of Edmund's victory. She triumphed in his glory, and a deeper glow burnt upon her cheek, from the proud consciousness she felt that she had not placed her affections upon an unworthy object. "We have no time to lose, girls," said the Duke. "I would not miss being with Sir Ambrose when he receives a letter for kingdoms. Here, Hippolyte, Augustus, get a balloon ready, and let us be off directly. How tedious these fellows are! They might have removed the church steeple in the time they have wasted about that balloon." "If your grace would have a moment's patience," said Hippolyte, holding the cords of the balloon. But his grace has no patience. It was an ingredient nature had quite forgotten to put into his composition, and without waiting for the ascending ladder to get down, he sprang into the car in such haste the moment the balloon was brought to the door, that he was in imminent danger of oversetting it. So, he said. "Very well, that will do. And now, girls, that you are safely embarked, we will be off. Hippolyte, you will steer us, and Adelard, you go into the buttery, and let my fellows give you something to eat. You will want something after your fatigues. There, that will do. Don't let us hinder a moment." The rest of his speech was lost in the air as the balloon floated majestically away. "It's often appeared very astonishing to me," said Adelard, after watching the balloon until it was out of sight, "to observe how partial great people are generally to aerial mode of transit. For my part, I think pedestrian matter infinitely more agreeable." "De gustibus non est disputandum," replied Augustus, the Duke's footman, to whom this observation was addressed. "But I think I observe symptoms of lassitude upon you, Mr. Adelard. Will you not put adjourn to the apartment of Mrs. Russell, our housekeeper, to repair by some aliment refreshery the excessive exhaustion you have sustained in the course of your morning's exertions?" "Willingly, Mr. Augustus. I own candidly, I feel the want of a little wholesome nutrition. I shall, besides, be extremely happy to avail myself of the opportunity fortune to benignantly presents of paying my respects to Mrs. Russell, whom I have not seen these 3 days." The worthy housekeeper was equally rejoiced with Adelard at his instance of the fortune's benignity, a sort of sentimental flirtation having been going on between them for the last 30 years. She accordingly stroked down her snow-white apron, readjusted her mob cap, and smoothed her gray hairs, which were divided upon her forehead, with the most scrupulous exactness, before she advanced to welcome her visitors. "What will you take, my dear Mr. Adelard?" she said, as soon as he was within hearing. "What can you fancy? I have a delicious corner of a cold venison pastry in my pantry." Words are altogether too feeble to express the transports of my gratitude at receiving so gracious an accolade, beauteous Eloisa, replied the romantic butler, for thus, in allusion to his own name, was he wont to call her. But though you had only the rigours of the parcelet to invite to me, instead of the comforts of your well-stored pantry, still would words be wanting to express the feeling in my bosom on thus again beholding you. Spare my blushes, said Mrs. Russell, casting her eyes upon the ground, and playing with the corner of her apron. I feel Roseate's suffusion glow upon my cheeks, and your flattering sense strikes upon the tympandium of my articular organs. Oh, Miss Russell, sighed Adelard, gazing upon her tenderly. Then, after a short pause, he continued, As to the ailments of which your provident kindness should slouch my appetite, though venison be the wholesome viand, and was reckoned by the ancients efficacious in preventing fevers, and though the very mention of a savoury pastry makes me epithete, usually employed in secreting the mucus of my tongue, erect themselves, thereby occasioning to overflow of the saliva, yet will I deny myself the indulgence and content myself simply with the boiled egg, as being more likely to agree with the present enfeebled state of my digestive organs of my stomach. You shall have it instantly, cried Mrs. Russell. And will you have the kindness to superintend the culinary arrangements of it yourself? Rejoined Adelard. I do not like the albumen too much congratulated, and prefer it without any nutritious oil, simply flavored by the addition of a small quantity of common muriate of soda. The egg was soon prepared and devoured. Thank you, dear Miss Russell, said Adelard. This reflection was most acceptable. I had felt for some time the gastric juice corroding the coats of my stomach, and still, though I have now given it a solid substance to act upon, I think it would not be amiss to dilute the virulence by the addition of a little fluid. Have you anything cool and refreshing? I have some bottled beer, replied Miss Russell, but I am afraid the carbonic acid has not been sufficiently disengaged during the process of vinous fermentation to render it wholesome, and there is scarcely any alcohol in the whole composition. That is exactly what I want, said Adelard, for my physicians have expressly forbidden stimulants, provided the gluten that forms the germ was properly separated in the preparation of the malt, and the seed sufficiently germinated to convert the fecula into sugar. I shall be perfectly satisfied. I can guarantee the accuracy of its preparation both with regard to the malt and the beer, repeated Mrs. Russell, and the frothing fluid soon flowed into a goblet, the infinite satisfaction of the thirsty butler, who, after a hearty draught, vowed nectar itself was never half so delicious, and that all the gods of Olympus would envy him if they but could taste his fare, and see the blooming Hebe that his cup bearer. Oh! 2-century-old English is such a fun thing to read. Chapter 4. When the balloon of the Duke approached the habitation of Sir Ambrose, its occupiers perceived the worthy baronet walking the hasty strides towards the mount of the telegraph, which commanded an extensive view of the surrounding country, followed by Edric and Dr. Edworthen, who appeared vainly endeavoring to persuade him to relax a speed so little suited to his advanced years. Do not talk to me of growing slowly, when I expect the news of my darling Edmund, exclaimed Sir Ambrose, continuing his rapid pace, his heart beating with paternal pride, and his countenance beaming with exultation. I am also anxious to hear of my brother, said Edric, but after the information we have already received by the telegraph dispatch, it appears to me that we have little more to learn of importance. Edric, you are not a father, and you have no idea of father's anxiety, replied Sir Ambrose, hurrying on to the mount, as though he hoped the rapidity of his motion would afford some relief to the impatience of his mind. whilst the party of the Duke, seeing the balloon which he was hastening, opened the valves of the balloon, and made preparations to descend upon the same spot. The Duke and Sir Ambrose were always glad to meet, but as the present occasion was one of more the ordinary interest, they now greeted each other with more than ordinary pleasure. The Duke had always been warmly attached to Edmund, and his voice actually trembled with agitation as he exclaimed, "Well, my old friend, see, your brave boy is determined to keep us alive still. Our blood would stagnate in our veins if he did not give us a fillip now and then to rouse us. But what does the young rogue say of himself? I hope he's not wounded." "He never mentions himself," replied Sir Ambrose, tears glistening in his eyes as he pressed the hand of his friend warmly in his own. "Edmund loves his country too devotedly to think of either peril or reward for his service." "But he shall have a reward," cried the Duke, laughing. "Aye, and a fitting one, too. Elvira, what do you say?" Elvira blushed, smiled, and looked down, as young ladies generally do upon such occasions, while Sir Ambrose, who had now reached the summit of the mount, was too eagerly looking around in every direction to hear his friend's remarks. In those days, the ancient method of conveying the post having been found much too slow for the enlightened people, an ingenious scheme had been devised by which the letters were put into balls and discharged by steam cannons, from place to place, every town in the district having a piece of toile metallique, or woven wire, suspended in the air, so as to form a kind of net to arrest the progress of the ball, and being provided with a cannon to send it off again, whilst the letters belonging to the neighbourhood shall be extracted, whilst, to prevent accidents, the mail-post letter balls were always preceded with one similar description, made of thin wood, with a hole in its side, whilst, collecting the wind to pass it along, made a kind of whizzing noise to admonish people to keep out of the way. The mount on which Sir Ambrose now stood commanded an extensive view, and the scene it presented was beautiful in the extreme. On one side, innumerable grass fields, richly wooded and only divided from each other by invisible iron fences, appeared like one vast park, whilst on the other, the waving corn, its full heads beginning to darken in the sun, gave a rich glowing tint to the landscape. But Sir Ambrose thought not of the prospect. He did not even see the murmuring brooks and shading groves and smiling vales and swelling hills that constituted its beauty. No, his attention was wholly occupied by a black spot he had just discovered on the edge of the horizon. In breathless anxiety, his eyes almost starting from their sockets, he bent eagerly forwards, gazing on a small and at first almost impeccable speck. It gradually grew larger and larger. It rapidly approached. In a few seconds, a slight buzz through the air, and long-expected balls whizzed past him. Sir Ambrose's agitation was excessive. With trembling limbs and livid lips, he hurried to the nearest station, which luckily was close at hand, and round which several of his household were assembled, and in their impatience to hear the news. Sir Ambrose could not speak, but the person whose providence it was to sort the letters guessed his errand, and opening the bag held forth an ardently expected treasure. Gasping for breath, Sir Ambrose eagerly attempted to take it, but his hands were unequal to the task. The violence of his motion overpowered him, and after a short but fruitless struggle, he fell senseless to the ground. The confusion produced by his unexpected incident was indescribable. The old Duke walked up and down, wringing his hands in exclamation, "What shall we do? What will become of us?" Whilst the rest of the party endeavored to give assistance to Sir Ambrose. "Parental affection," said Davis, who had an unfortunate propensity for making long speeches precisely at the moment when no one was likely to attend to him. "Parental affection has been universally allowed by all writers, both ancient and modern, to be one of the strongest passions of the soul. The most exalted instances might be produced of the surprising energy of the universal sentiment." "For heaven's sake, help me raise my father!" cried Edric. "Give him some air! He will die!" "Patience," continued Davis. "It is necessary in all things, and is perhaps one of the most useful and estimable quantities of life. It enables us to bear, without shrinking, the bitterest evils that can assail us. Without patience, philosophy would never have made those wonderful discoveries that subjugate nature to our yoke." Fetch me some fresh water, exclaimed Eric, or he will expire before your eyes. It appears to me, said a laborer who had been mending a steam-digging machine in a neighboring field, and who now stood leaning upon his work, looking on gravely all that passed, without attempting to offer the least assistance. It appears to me that it would be highly improper to administer a aqueous fluid to its natural state of rigidity under the existing circumstances. The present suspension of animation under which Sir Ambrose labours is evidently occasioned by the want of circulation. Now, as it is properly the hot liquids, rather than the cold ones, to supply a stimulant necessary of the reproduction of circulation, I opine that hot water would answer the purpose better than cold. In the meantime, Father Morris had brought some water from the neighboring fountain, and throwing it in the patient's face, Sir Ambrose opened his eyes. For some moments he stared wildly around him, but as soon as he began to recollect what had passed, he implored Father Morris to give him his ardently desired letter. "You are not yet equal to reading it," said Father Morris compassionately. "I fear the exertion will be too much for you." "Oh, give it to me! Give it to me!" exclaimed the poor old man. "If a spark of mercy remain in your soul, do not keep me in this agony." It was impossible to resist the tone of real anguish that accompanied these words. As Father Morris put the letter into his hands, Sir Ambrose took it eagerly, though he trembled so that he could scarcely break the seal. At last he tore it open and gazed at its contents, but he could not read a word. He dashed away tears and rubbed his eyes impatiently. All was in vain. The writing was still illegible. "Read, read!" cried he, in a trembling voice of agitation. "For heaven's sake, read! Will no one have pity upon me?" Father Morris took the letter and read it aloud, while Sir Ambrose sat, his eyes raised to heaven, his hands clasped together, and the tears rolling down his aged cheeks, listening to the words and drinking in every syllable. After giving a circumstantial account of the battle, and assuring his father that he had not been wounded, Edmund proceeded thus. "The Queen has written a letter of approbation in her own hand, and has graciously pleased to signify her intention of honouring me with a triumphal entry to London. She has likewise conferred upon me the letters of nobility. The goodness of my sovereign makes a deep impression upon my breast, but for the rest I assure you that neither the applause of the multitude nor the privilege of writing Lord before my name can afford the moment's satisfaction to a heart that pants only for the pleasure of seeing again those most dear to it, nor shall I enjoy the triumph unless those I love be present to give it zest. I congratulate you, my dear patron," exclaimed Father Morris as soon as he had finished. "I congratulate you from my inmost soul." "To his triumph!" exclaimed the Duke, rubbing his hands in ecstasy. "Yes, yes, that will be. Won't we, my old friend? God bless him! I'm glad he's not hurt, though. And so, you see, in spite of all his glory, he can't be happy without us. How prettily he says that. Not all the probation of the sovereign, he praises of the people. No, what is it? I don't remember the exact words, but I know the sense was he wouldn't be happy without us. And God bless him. I'm sure he's happy as he can be at the thought of seeing him." Sir Ambrose could not reply, but the tears ran down his aged cheeks like rain, and his heart breathed a silent offering of thanksgiving to the Almighty Being who had thus bestowed victory upon his son, and his lips murmured some inarticulate sounds of transport, whilst Elvira and Rosabella mingled their tears with his, for often joy becomes painful at seeking seeks a relief like grief. The party now slowly returned to the mansion of Sir Ambrose, so completely occupied in discussing Edmund's letter as to be totally unaware that Edric had not accompanied them. Yet such was the case. The youthful philosopher's heart had swelled almost to bursting as he had listened to the reading of his brother's letter. He now rushed into a thick wood, shelving down the romantic stream which formed a part of the pleasure grounds of Sir Ambrose. Almost without knowing where he was going, Edric plunged among the trees and threw himself upon a grassy bank under the shade and upon the border of the rivulet. The gentle murmuring of the water gave a delightful sense of refreshing coolness, particularly agreeable upon the burning heat of the day. As Edric lay, his eyes fixed on the sparkling waves as they danced in the sunbeams, with both his hands pressed firmly upon his throbbing temples, endeavoring in vain to analyze his new and strange emotions as struggled for mastery of his bosom. By degrees he became more calm, and though his heart still beat with feelings he could not yet quite explain, he felt soothed by the softly gliding streamlet, and the stormy passions of his breast seemed to lull into tranquillity as one hand fell carelessly down by his side, and the other merely supported the head it no longer constrained. It was not envy that occasioned Edric's emotions, but shame and indignation burnt in his bosom when he recollected that he was wasting his days in comparative obscurity, whilst his brother, only a few years older than himself, was ennobling the name bequeathed to him by his ancestors. "I cannot also become famous," thought he, his heart swollen with emulation. "Though I abhor the profession of soldier, are not there other ways to open me to attaining eminence? Why should I not exert myself? I will remain in the indolence no longer. I, too, will prove myself worthy of my forefathers, and show the world that the exalted blood of the Montague was not degenerated in my veins." His eyes sparkled with the thought, and he half raised himself, as though eager to put into immediate execution. A moment's reflection, however, restored him to himself, and he could not help smiling at his own folly. "And yet I call myself a philosopher," he thought. "Alas, alas, how little do we know ourselves, and after all, the pursuit of knowledge is only the employment worthy of a man of sense. The transitory applause of the multitude it's beneath him to accept. Nature is a goddess I adore, and if it should be granted to me to explore her secrets, I shall be the happiest of mankind. But why should I pass my life in anxious cravings never destined to be realized? The events of today have only proved yet more clearly the little value of society is of my father. Were I absent, I should not be forgotten. Why then should I not travel and satisfy these restless wishes that gnaw at my heart and poison every pleasure? I was not born to rest contented with a dull routine of domestic life, and I detest hypocrisy. I will seek my father, and explaining my real sentiments, break off this hatred marriage and set off for Egypt immediately." Satisfied with this resolution, Edric rose and hastily walked towards his father's mansion, with all the inward vigor which the consciousness of having made up one's mind is certain to bestow, and which perhaps is one of the most agreeable sensations that can be experienced by the human mind, as that of suspense or indecision is doubtlessly one of the most unpleasant. Edric found his father and the Duke busily engaged in consulting upon the intended journey, which was an event in both their lives, for as since the universal adoption of balloons, journeys were performed without either trouble or expense. The rich had lost all inducement to undertake them, and it was rare for a man of rank to quit his family mansion, unless he had some post at court. "I have a palace in London," said the Duke, "which I hope will make you home, though it has long been unused, and I doubt whether it is unfit for your reception." "Ah, do not distress yourself about making arrangements for my family," replied Sir Ambrose, "for you know I have a brother living in London, and though we have not seen each other for years, I think upon such an occasion it is ought to forget the animosity, and visit him, if he will receive me." "True," rejoined the Duke. "I never thought of that, but you're quite right. Though he did make a foolish marriage, the ties of blood are too strong to be easily shaken off, and this is an excellent opportunity for reconciliation." "Another thing also weighs on me," continued Sir Ambrose. "You know that though I was much hurt at the marriage, I was in some measure the cause of it." "You the cause of it!" exclaimed the Duke in excessive surprise. "You know," resumed Sir Ambrose, "my brother was always a bookworm, and the last time I visited him I found him so uncomfortable in his domestic affairs, so dreadfully neglected, that I advised him to get the advantage of managing women to act as a housekeeper. He did so. In 12 months he made her Mrs. Montague." "I always thought your brother was too learned to know anything so useful, and too clever to be able to take care of himself. But I own I never suspected him of being such a fool as to marry." Perhaps I was the greater one than myself for resenting his conduct, for I believe they get on very well. Mrs. Montague does not want sense. I do not doubt her abilities, or that she is equally well fitted for her original situation, but very different qualities are required for the wife of Mr. Montague from those which are suited to his housekeeper. I know, and also there is perhaps nothing more difficult than for a person in her situation to preserve the medium between affection and vulgarity. However, I am told that though Mrs. Montague cannot quite divest herself from the pedantry she acquired at charity school in her youth, and though she still talks as learnedly as if she had never ventured beyond the precincts of the kitchen, yet that she makes a brother a good wife, and they say her daughter Claire is a charming girl. I can imagine nothing good springing from such a source. I blank. Prejudice, my dear Duke, sheer prejudice. Well, I will say no more about it, for, as you say, Mrs. Montague makes her brother a good wife, and he is happy with her, and I don't see any right anybody else has to trouble himself about the matter. And so, I don't like quarrels in family. I think you are quite right in wishing to see your brother. However, if they do not make you comfortable, I hope you'll always remember you have another friend. And so, we'll now wish you good day. Come, girls! And the old Duke trotted off, followed by his fair companions. Edric's heart throbbed violently when he found himself alone with his father. The moment was arrived that he had so ardently been wishing for, and yet he was silent. He had scarcely had patience to wait until his father's conference with the Duke, and whilst it lasted, he had been arranging and rearranging 1,000 times in his mind the phrases he meant to make use of. Yet now they seemed to have all vanished from his memory, and he stood gazing through the open window, his mind feeling a perfect chaos, without being able to recollect a single word of what he had determined to say. Sir Ambrose, in the meantime, felt perfectly happy, and the buoyancy of his spirits tapped his son on the shoulder. "What's Almort, Sir Knight of the Woeful Countenance?" said he. Come, I will have no gloomy looks today. But hey! What is the matter with you, Edric? You don't smile. Are you unhappy? You look as if you had something upon your mind." "I have something upon my mind, my dear father," said Eric solemnly, "and something I wish to communicate to you." He stopped when he had said this, but Sir Ambrose did not reply, and for some minutes neither spoke. At length Edric broke the pause, which had been one of the perfect agony to him, and speaking very fast he exclaimed, "Yet I don't know why I should hesitate. It is that I do not love Isabella, that I can never marry her, that I should be entirely miserable even to think of it, and that this is fixed and unalterable determination." "Day!" cried Sir Ambrose. "What is all this? Not marry Rosabella?" "Never. No torture should induce me. I'm convinced you would make me wretched," continued Edric, hurrying through what he meant to say. "Our tempers don't assimilate. We should both be miserable. I should be very sorry to cause either you or the Duke's a moment's easiness. Very sorry. I would die first. But to marry Rosabella would be worse than dying 1,000 deaths. We should be the most wretched of human beings, and you would be unhappy at seeing me so." "Mercy upon me!" cried Sir Ambrose, heaving a deep sigh and feeling almost out of breath from the enormity of his son. "I thought you'd done just now, but I see that you can use your tongue fast enough when it certainly pleases you. Not marry Isabella? Is the boy mad? Is she not young, beautiful, and highly accomplished? What would you have, I wonder? Certainly you must be out of your senses to refuse such a woman, and one, too, so superior to yourself in rank and fortune." "In fortune I allow her to be superior, but I think the mystery attached to her name of her father more than compensates the difference of rank." "Don't talk to me of what you don't understand. Duke Edgar is dead, and his fault should be buried with him. Besides, it is hard the girl should suffer for the sins of her father." "What were those sins, my dear sir? I have often heard them darkly hinted at, and something almost too dreadful to mention, but I never heard the particulars." "Edric," said Sir Ambrose solemnly, If you have the least regard for my feelings and entertain any duty for me as a son, never again advert to the subject. Circumstances they are relating to it, a deep, awful, and mysterious nature with which I am well acquainted, which I have taken a solemn oath never to reveal. Never speak of them again. The bare remembrance makes me shudder. Oh, would to heaven I could forget them. I'm very sorry, sir, that the question has given you such pain, but rest assured that my curiosity shall never again annoy you. I'm not angry with you, Edric. You could not know the feeling your question could create in my bosom, and it is natural you should wish to know something your father of your intended wife. However, think no more of him. Consider the present Duke and your father-in-law, and if possible forget that such a person as Duke Edgar ever existed. You forget, sir, said Edric, firmly but respectfully, that I have before declared my determination never to marry Rosabella. Nonsense, rejoiced his father. You don't know what you're talking about. The world would call me as mad as yourself if I were to let you act so foolishly. Besides, what would the Duke say? To speak candidly, sir, that is what principally annoys me, for I trust that your good sense and affectionate disposition will soon enable you to see the affair in its proper light. And that is to say, you think I am an old fool, and that you can coax me into anything you please. But you shall find your error. You shall learn that I will not be coaxed, I will be obeyed. You shall marry Rosabella, or you shall leave my house. My dear father, said Edric, attempting to take Sir Ambrose's hand. Away, sir, cried his father, shaking him off. Obedience far outweighs words. If I am your dear father, you will act in compliance with my wishes. If you do not, it is a mockery to call me dear. I cannot marry Rosabella. Was ever such obstinacy, such folly? The world will think you distracted. I care not for the world, cried Edric impatiently. Youth-like, returned his father. It is very strange that no one will be contented to take the experience at second hand. They must buy it for themselves, and sometimes pay very dear for it before they profit from its lessons. You talk like a child, Edric. When you are a little older, you will find practice and theory are different things. You say you despise the world, but you are wrong. The world must not be despised. Nay, more, it ought to be not even slighted. As long as you live in it, you must conform to its opinions. It is ridiculous to think otherwise. I don't like to hear people say they don't care for the world. The world must be cared for, and when people pretend to scorn it, it is generally because they are aware they have done something to make it scorn them. But, my dear father, you would not wish me to sacrifice my consciousness to its dictates. And pray, sir, what has your conscience to do with the matter of the question? I should not sacrifice it to marrying a woman I could never love. In my opinion, nothing could be more sacred than the marriage vow, and with what feelings I could enter into the solemn engagement in the presence of Almighty God, calling upon him to witness it, when I know my heart was in variance with my words. My soul would recoil with horror at such blasphemy. You talk your conscience, Edric, but should not you rather say your inclinations? The person of Rosabella does not please your fancy, I suppose, and to gratify a capricious whim you would destroy the happiness of your father and ruin your own prospects forever. It is not the person of Rosabella that I complain, my dear father. I allow her to be beautiful as a Venus, and that her talents even excess her personal charms. But when I see her large black eyes flash in fury, her rosy lips curled into an expression of indignant scorn, I forget her beauty and think only of the fearful passions of her soul. Your objections are futile, Edric, at any rate. They are of no avail. You must marry her. I am sorry it is against her inclination, but I will not have my authority disputed. Besides, the disappointment to the Duke would be dreadful. It was but this morning that he proposed, as soon as you and Edmund should marry, I should give up my estate to you, while he to your brother, whilst you two old folks should retire to a cottage in the hill, and pass the remainder of our lives contemplating with rapture the happiness of our children. The Duke is obstinate. So you have discovered that, have you? Well, you are right there, for when he has taken a fancy into his head, no argument can turn him from his point. But there's a difference between obstinacy and firmness.
Now, though I am not obstinate like the Duke, you shall find I am firm, Edric. However, as I have always been an indulgent father, I do not wish to decide hastily now. I give you a week to make up your mind, at the expiration of which time you shall marry Rosabella or quit my house forever. No reply, young man. I will not hear a word. Be gone. Leave me now. In a week's time let me know your decision. It was in vain to attempt a reply, and Edric left his father's presence, oppressed by a rage, persistent sentiment of evil, which fearful cloud, gloomy, impenetrable, sometimes hangs upon our thoughts, and foreboding horrors, though so dimly and distinctly that, like all the gigantic phantoms we sometimes fancy through the midst of the twilight, their terrors seem increased tenfold by the very uncertainty that half shrouds them from our sight. Mingled from these feelings, however, was one of wild, unearthly joy. Driven from his father's house, he would be free to travel. His doubts might be satisfied. He might at last penetrate into the secrets of the grave, and partake, without restraint, of so ardently desired fruit of the tree of knowledge. Nothing would be hidden from him. Nature would be forced to yield up her treasures to his view. Her mysteries would be revealed, and he would become great, omniscient, and godlike. His mind filled with the chaos of like thoughts like these, which he strove in vain to arrange, and which seemed to swell his brain almost to bursting. Edric involuntarily strolled again into the wood he had so lately quitted, and again throwing himself upon the banks of the murmuring stream, he was soon lost to reverie. And I hate I had to pause that when I only needed another minute. But welcome in. Thank you for the alert, Pixel Doctor. And now I am going to take a break. So I will see you back in a bit.
Okay, I think we're back. I don't see anything saying I'm in ads, so I guess we're back. Check something. It's Fridays. Okay. The language in this book has to be one of the more entertaining things about it. So in the 22nd century, apparently we've got very efficient hot air balloons. Our mail is delivered by cannonball and telegraph. That's it said it's supposed to be in the future, and I don't know how we would have missed another mummy. But at least we're getting to the point that the boy can now actually go and try to find it. But personal hot air balloons for the rich. Mail by cannonball. And wood blocks that make noise to signify that it's coming. And this is a science fiction. I would wonder what she would think of what the 21st century is actually like. I mean, this is written within a decade of Frankenstein. I said this is 198 years old. And it's supposed to be in our future. It's very... yeah, I'm not even sure how to describe it. The language I'm just absolutely loving. We're 4 chapters in, now we're at the start of chapter 5. So, I'll drink real quick. Let's continue. Chapter 5. In the meantime, different emotions were agitating violently in the bosoms of the 2 lovely heiresses of the Duke. When they reached the castle, each of them retired to her separate apartments to ruminate upon what had passed. Confidence did not exist between them, for confidence requires congeniality of mind, and those of the fair cousins were essentially different. Each princess, however, had a favorite attendant, or rather a companion, in whose bosom she was in the habit of pouring her thoughts, and on their arrival to the castle they parted immediately, equally eager to find their prospective confidants and inform them of all that had happened. Marianne had been the attendant of Rosabella from her childhood, and haughty as the princess naturally was, she was, like many other haughty people, completely the slave of her servants. Marianne was perfectly aware of her power, and she occasionally used it tyrannically. On the present occasion, however, she was really alarmed by the glowing cheeks, sparkling eyes, and the agitated frame of Rosabella, and asked, with the appearance of deep interest, if she was ill. "Mind though not in body," replied Rosabella, throwing herself upon the sofa, and hiding her face in both hands. "Oh, Marianne, what a wretch I am!" "What is the matter?" asked the servante. "He loves her, he
Doors, sir, cries Rosabella, staring from her couch and traversing the room rapidly. Curses on her beauty! Oh, that a look of mine could wither it, or that she could feel the burning fire that rages here. Then stopping suddenly, she gazed upon her attendant with the wildness of a maniac, and pressing her hand firmly against her side, threw herself upon the couch, exclaiming, "Oh, Marian, why am I not so beloved like Elvira?" "Are you certain that she is beloved?" "Certainly," reiterated Isabella, wringing her hands. "Alas, alas, would I were not so certain! But can I doubt the evidence of my senses? This very day, I saw Father Morris put a letter into her hands, which was enclosed in the address to Sir Ambrose. I saw a blush of conscious pleasure glow upon her cheeks as she perused it, and I could have stabbed her in the heart, yes, exalted her in dying agonies, triumphed in her groans. Oh, Marianne, is it not extraordinary that one so great, so noble, and exalted as Edmund can love such a poor, weak, and feeble thing as Elvira? But she loves him not, at least not as he should be loved. She's incapable of it." "I wonder Father Morris gave her the letter." "He could not help it, Marianne. It fell from its closure when Sir Ambrose tore it open, and when she saw it fall, even saw her eye rest on the address. Father Morris merely placed it on the ground and placed it in her hand." "I thought he would not have given it to her voluntarily." "No, I think not. I believe the father is my friend, though I own sometimes it appears strange to me, Marianne, that I should seem to prefer my interest over that of everyone else, when I so many times bind him to Sir Ambrose's family, and so few to me. Nay, though I am often peevish and unreasonable with him, he never is offended, and appears to remain still warmly attached to me as ever. I cannot account for it." "He has ties that bind him to you that you know not of," said Marianne in a low, under voice. "He was your father's friend." "Was he?" cried Rosabella eagerly. "Then perhaps he may enable me to clear off the shade that has so long hung upon my father's name. By heaven, neither the gratification of my love nor the revenge will give me half the pleasure." "You had better not ask him," said Marianne, in the same low, mysterious tone. "You can learn nothing upon the subject which it would give you pleasure to hear." Then, changing her voice, she added, "But what of Edric and the news of his brother's glory?" "I know not, I care not. Ice itself cannot be colder than Edric. When we meet and he offered his hand to greet me, his touch seemed to freeze my very veins. Cold, prudent, calculating, cautious. He has all the vices of age without his excuses. I hate him." "You do not then, I suppose, long for the moment when you are to become his bride?" asked the companion with a sarcastic smile. "Long for it, Marianne!" cried Rosabella, starting from her couch and clasping her hands together with energy. "Long for it? No! If all the resources fail, death shall free me before the hated moment arrives!" And as she spoke, Rosabella walked up and down the room in a state of violent agitation. "But your uncle," resumed Marianne. "My uncle!" repeated Rosabella, stopping short. Yes, my uncle is positive, and I, a poor dependent and in his power. But even that shall not control my will. Poor dependent as I am free, and sooner would be a labor for my bread. Sooner would I rather perish in the streets, or endure unheard of torments, and live in the palace surrounded by crowds of adoring slaves, if the price were that I should call Edric husband." Marianne, satisfied with the ease of which she found she could play upon the feelings of her mistress, now touched a chord that thrilled the softer emotions. "I can never believe," she said, "that a mind so noble as that of Edmund can long remain with the thraldom of Elvira. When he comes to know her better, and to feel the feebleness of her soul, he must despise her." Yes, Guilty, I'm having far too much fun doing these female voices. Do you think so? Cried Rosabella eagerly. But you deceive yourself, Marianne. Edmund is so blinded that he fancies your very faults perfections. But the blindness cannot last forever, and when it wears off, disgust must ensue. Oh, Marianne, if it were so! Exclaimed Rosabella, and sitting down she rested her elbows on her knees and pressed her hands against her beating forehead, concealing her face and remaining absently lost in meditation. Marianne did not disturb her. She was aware that she had given her active imagination a theme to work upon, and she left her to enjoy it, tranquillity resuming her usual avocations without seeming to notice her abstraction. Whilst this scene was passing in the apartment of Rosabella, Elvira was informing her confidante, Emma, who had been her governess and remained her companion, of the pleasure she had experienced from hearing the success of Edmund, from the tenderness of his letter. "How I wish I could love him as he deserves," she said. "But alas, I fear it is not in my nature. I can scarcely even comprehend what he thinks I ought to feel, and the violence of his manner terrifies me beyond expression. It is not extraordinary, Emma, that his passion, which seems so universally extended throughout its whole nature, should be alone a stranger to my breast, that I alone should be debarred from feeling its influence. Edmund complains of my coldness, and I feel that he has reason to do so. I feel that his love is different from mine. I esteem and respect him. I have even a sincere friendship of him, but no one values his worth more than I. I should also be very sorry if any misfortune were to befall upon him, but this is all. I do not think I am capable of feeling more for anyone." "Indeed, you deceive yourself," replied Emma. "I am sure a heart so kind and affectionate as yours is capable of love. Do not marry Lord Edmund. I am certain you do not love him as you will love one day, and if the day should arrive and you feel a real passion, what will your horror be at the recollection of the sacred ties which bind you to one who is indifferent to you? I shudder at the thought." "And so should I, Emma. But it is impossible such an event can happen. If I were married to Edmund, could never love another, even if my nature were susceptible to a passion, a fact I much doubt." Emma shook her head incredulously. "Oh," she sighed, "how little do you know of love!" "I know more of it than you can imagine. In my opinion, people would never fall in love if they had the abundance of other thoughts to occupy their minds. They would marry, of course, but that, as everyone knows, is quite a different thing." "Then you disbelieve in love entirely?" "Not entirely, but I think what is generally called love is the offspring of idleness. When people have nothing to do, particularly if they happen to have warm imaginations, they amuse themselves by picturing an idol of perfection. This they endow with all kinds of virtue, probable and improbable, and they are enchanted with the fantasy because it is their own creation. They soon find a face or figure that pleases them, and this they attach the charms to they had begun before their imaginary idol, no matter whether they accord or not. When people are what is called in love, they are like persons in green spectacles. They see everything of a color that does not really belong to it. Marriage, however, lifts up the magic well and displays the real faults and imperfections of every individual. The self-deluded mortals, when they find their mistake, go too late and start back aghast at the appalling spectre that presents itself, crying out bitterly against deception, whilst in fact they have only been deceiving themselves." "You reason admirably, but it is only from the head, and not the heart. If you had ever felt, you would perceive the fallacy of your arrangements." "I think not, for I am convinced the experience of 99 persons of 100 would confirm what I say, if they could be but persuaded to avow their real sentiments.
This, however, they are always in such cases very reluctant to do, and no one likes to own himself deceived. And do you think all love is like that which you have been speaking of? Heaven forbid! No, no, Emma. Do not imagine I am such a heretic to deny the existence of true love. I only think it is very difficult to be met with. That it does exist, I believe firmly, but few, very few are the bosoms that are capable of feeling it. Now I agree with you perfectly, though you could not mean all you before illustrated. Excuse me, Emma, I did not mean what I said, but I did not speak then of real love. I spoke only of passion, or rather, fancy that usurps its name. Real, pure, undefiled love is that absorbing affection that prefers another's happiness to its own. That devotion that would sink unknown to the grave to procure another's happiness, that seeks not its own gratification, but would sacrifice all the world it can give to promote the welfare of another, that can taste no pleasure and partake of no delight unless it is participated by the beloved object, and even then joys in satisfaction more than its own. This is what I call love. I can imagine such a passion, though I shall never feel it. However, that it may be felt I am fully convinced, though even you must acknowledge it's rare to find. Alas, my dear mistress, said Emma, sighing heavily, every word you utter convinces me you deceive yourself. For God's sake, do not marry Lord Edmund. You could have no idea the romantic feelings you describe if your heart were not open to receive them. Lord Edmund does not— Hush, Emma, hush, exclaimed Elvira, playfully interrupting her. It is of no use. Say what we will, like people that argue, we are sure to remain of the same opinion when we are done. I don't believe anybody yet has ever convinced by words. We must wait for facts, and in attendance, suppose we consult upon that dress will be most becoming for us to wear at the approaching ceremony. Emma gladly consented, and the princess and her companion were soon involved in a maze of ribbons, crepes, gauzes, silks, and satins, from which it would be quite in vain for me to attempt to extricate them. When Edric next saw his father, after a partial explanation that had taken place between them, he was excessively surprised to find him behave exactly as usual. The youthful philosopher was rather disconcerted at this conduct, which completely deranged all his speculations. In the course of his meditations in the grove, he had magnanimously made up his mind to endure every species of persecution, rather than to submit to the slightest degree to alter his opinions. And such is the strange and whimsical inconsistency of the human mind, that he was actually disappointed when he found there appeared little prospect of heroic resolutions being called into practice. It may seem strange to those who are feeling convinced the substantial comforts of the hospitable mansion and well-supplied table that anyone should be found quixotic enough to lament that he had lost the chance of being deprived of them. But Edric's was the age of romance. Prospects of bustle, adventure. Edric's was the age of romance. His life had hitherto passed in one dull, monotonous round, and the prospect of bustle and adventure has, in such cases, most irresistible charms. He also knew nothing of the world, and was almost as ignorant of the real evils of life as the French princess, who, hearing that some persons had died of hunger, wondered at their folly, and said that, for her part, rather than be famished, she would eat bread and cheese. Thus, as we said before, Edric was rather chagrined than delighted when his father greeted him in the morning after their conference, as affectionately as before, and very amicably proposed that as soon as breakfast was ended, they should take a walk together to the castle of the Duke. Unwilling to vex his father needlessly by refusing, and yet fearful of compromising his firmness by appearing to see that might be treachery on the part of his opponents, our young philosopher gave a rather ungracious assent to the proposal, and remained apparently absorbed in meditation during the whole walk. They found the Duke extremely busy,
Like many other people who have few real affairs to occupy them, he was quite delighted with anything that seemed to promise a little bustle, and was firmly resolved to make the most of it. He was then giving orders for an illumination and a public dinner to his tenants, bell ringing, speech making, and a variety of other things we have really neither time nor patience in enumerate. Busy as he was, however, he was glad to see our friends and greeted them most cordially. "You are come in the very nick of time," he said. "I was just upon the point of sending for you. Do you know, Sir Ambrose, it has struck me that the triumph of Edmund's will be an admirable opportunity for his marriage, and of yours too, Edric. What say you, Sir Ambrose?" "Oh, of course, I have no objection." "And, of course," resumed the Duke, "I do not suppose the young men have any. What do you say, Edric?" But Edric did not speak, for, to tell the truth, he did not exactly know what to say. "Edric is delighted that it has deprived him of the power of utterance," observed the baronet, rather maliciously perceiving the Duke grow impatient. "I trust your grace will excuse me," said Eric, at length recovering himself. But, but what?" said the Duke impatiently. "I thought," resumed Edric, with a considerable hesitation, "that your grace did not intend that the princess should marry till they pass the age that would render, that is to say, that does render them eligible candidates for the throne." Edric did not express himself very clearly, as he was not altogether certain of what he was saying. The Duke, however, heard enough to put him into a passion. "So did I," he exclaimed. "I know that perfectly, but I have altered my mind. I tell you, Claudia isn't above 30, and she's likely to live these 50 years, so there's no use waiting for her death. Besides, I should like to see my children married before I die. I'm getting old, and anxiety in these respects increases with declining years." "Then my anxiety ought to be greater than yours, Duke, for I am the oldest," said Sir Ambrose. "By a couple of years at least," returned the Duke, laughing, "for I suppose that is about the difference in our ages. But don't you advise answering me, Edric? Do you think you have the eloquence enough to persuade your mistress to relinquish the prospect of the throne in your behalf?" "I would not wish her to make any sacrifice upon my account," replied Edric. "Confound such coldness! Why, when I was a young man, my heart would have beat like a pendulum in perpetual motion at such a proposition. Go to her, man, and try your fortune. She is a woman, therefore, to be wooed. She is a woman, therefore, to be won. Or rather, what perhaps will be better, I will send her for her here, and tell her my will. Egad, have a mind to surprise Edmund, and let you grace his triumph as bride and bridegroom." Thank you for that, great. Oh. "Rosabelle would never consent to such a proposition," exclaimed Edric, willing to postpone the dreaded explanation as long as possible. "I think not," resumed the Duke, "if you woo her with that face. However, you need not distress yourself, as you will have nothing to say till you get to the altar. I will take the rest upon myself, and I have a notion I shall prove the better suitor. I know women well, and how to manage them. I'll defy any woman in the world to have a will of her own whilst she is in my custody. I know how to quiet them and bring them round. You shall see how I will manage Rosabella. She won't have a word to say for herself. Here, Augustus, tell the Princess Rosabella I wish to speak to her." "Hold!" cried Eric. "I cannot allow you to send for the princess till I have first explained my real sentiments." "Nonsense," said the Duke. "However, I see there is no occasion to send for her, for yonder she comes. I will meet her and explain my sentiments, and then it will be quite time enough to talk about yours." So saying, he broke from Edric, who attempted to detain him and advanced to meet Rosabella. "Good God!" exclaimed Edric. "What will become of me? This obstinate old man would tell her I wish our union. For worlds, I would not mortify the proud spirit of Rosabella by publicly declining her hand. What shall I do? I must request a private interview, and throwing myself upon her mercy, persuade her to reject me.
Then you still persist in your determination, said Sir Ambrose. I hoped my kindness in appearing to forget what passed yesterday had disposed you to comply with my wishes. However, since you seem inclined to adhere to your resolution, you cannot be surprised that I should follow your example, and I can only repeat that if you do not Rosabella, you know the alternative.
I do, said Eric firmly, and I am prepared to meet it. In the meantime, the Duke met Rosabella, and evidently began to declare his wishes for her, and the color had fled from her cheeks, and her eyes were cast upon the ground, whilst her strongly compressed lips, and she walked silently by his side, showed that it was with infinite difficulty that she controlled her feelings sufficiently to hear him with patience.
In short, said the Duke, as he drew near Sir Andrew and his son, I have fixed upon the day after tomorrow for your wedding, and though I own time is somewhat short for preparations, you must satisfy to have your wedding clothes after your marriage instead of before, which I think need not make much difference. So now all I have to do will be to tell your cousin the day after tomorrow your name will be Montague.
And do you know whom you are disposing so unceremoniously?
Asked Rosabella, raising her brilliant eyes from the ground and fixing them upon him with a look of proud scorn. The Duke shrunk involuntarily with a withering glance, which seemed to fall upon him like the phasal power of the basilisk. Of whom am I disposing? Stammered he, unconsciously repeating her words. Of whom I'm disposing? Why, of my niece, to be sure, he continued, arranging with difficulty his scattered ideas. You are my niece, are you not?
Yes, returned Isabella. Unfortunately, I am your niece, and I would blush for an uncle who does not scruple to abuse so barbarously the last legacy bequeathed him by an unfortunate brother. Yes, my Lord Duke, I am your niece, your protégée, your dependent. I'm not ashamed to own that I owe my daily bread to your bounty, but notwithstanding all this, I'm not aware that I am your slave, nor do I think the pecuniary objections I am under you sufficient to give you the right to disposing me as an article of furniture or beast of burden.
You mistake the matter entirely, Isabella, said the Duke. I do not wish to hurt your feelings.
Do you think, then, when I am forced from stone or iron, that I am to be told to marry when and where you list without having the inclinations consulted of my affections granted? Look at the bridegroom for whom you destine me. Certainly it will be insensibility itself to resist such an overwhelming ardor.
You are right, Rosabella, replied the Duke. It is enough to evoke a stone. I admire your spirit. A woman should not be unsought, but won. And he, I own, looks as if he expected you to go down upon your knees and beg him to accept your hand.
You were mistaken, returned Edric, now taunted by the necessity of avowing himself, in spite of his former resolutions. It is not merely coldness that dictates my conduct. I should have explained myself before, had you permitted it, though I would willingly have spared the princess the public declaration. However, as I am now forced to avow my real sentiments, I openly and solemnly protest that no torment shall ever force me to become the husband of Rosabella. I'm so sorry. Spare me your pity, sir, said the princess haughtily, and interrupting him. I, at least, have no occasion for it, for know that I, too, would sooner experience 1,000 deaths than become your wife. Nothing but the respect I owe my uncle has prevented me from declaring sentiments sooner. The affection of my father kept me silent.
What a considerate pair, and how highly you ought to feel obliged to them, said the Duke, ironically. And pray, if your respect and affection permit you to answer the question, what may it be your high will and pleasure to intend doing now?
Whatever we please, replied both Eric and Rosabella, almost at the same instant.
Dear me, how amazingly condescending. So, as long as you are permitted to have your own way, we may have the honor of suggesting plans for your approbation whenever we please.
How astonishingly kind. I'm afraid we shall never be able to show ourselves properly grateful, Sir Ambrose. This irony, my lord, said Edric firmly, "is unworthy both of yourself and us. I will allow that you and my father have both reason to be displeased at our conduct, as it has disappointed hopes which you have long cherished. But permit me to say that if you had expressed your displeasure in serious, manly, and open terms as you did, it would have been much more befitting your high rank and importance of the subject, rather than taunting irony that you shall properly make use of." "Schooled too! By St. William!" exclaimed the Duke. "Upon my word, these are fond times when a man of any age and rank is to be lectured by a beardless stripling." "I did not mean to offend your grace," said Eric, "and I am sorry the violence of my feelings impelled you to use language unbefitting my youth and disrespectful to an old and valued friend of my father." "Say no more, young man," replied the Duke. "Apologies only double the offense. If such are your sentiments, I would rather you declared than concealed them, and I think even insolence preferable to hypocrisy. However, after what has passed, I can never meet you amicably again, and I shall even avoid entering the house of my friend, Sir Ambrose, whilst you remain in it." This was spoken with dignity and majestic firmness in tone. The Duke's voice, however, trembled a little as he continued. "I shall be sorry to lose the society of my old friend, and I should equally sorry to induce him to desert you, but I cannot willingly expose myself to insult, and I must accordingly decline all further intercourse with your family." "Decline all further intercourse with our family!" exclaimed Sir Ambrose. "This from you, Duke, and Edmund, my darling Edmund! Is he to suffer the faults of his brother?" "How do you know that the loss of my daughter would make him suffer?" asked the Duke, sneeringly. "Perhaps when the moment came for me to give him to her, he too would make a bow, and humbly asking my pardon, beg leave to decline the honor. Oh, curse such politeness!" "My dear Duke, I'd rather answer for Edmund with my life. He adores Elvira and loves you as a father. You too have always professed to love him." "And so I do. Didn't I rejoice like an old fool at his triumph? Didn't I determine to give him my daughter, and bestow my estate upon him? And were not these proofs of love?" They were, my dear old friend. And as he has never done anything to offend you, why should not your favorable intentions continue? Why should you punish him on account of this ungrateful idiot whom I renounce forever?" "Oh, my father, my dear father!" exclaimed Edric. "Do not say forever." "Yes, forever, I repeat," resumed Sir Ambrose. "Begone, let me never see you more. I told you yesterday my termination, and as you have chosen to incur the penalty, you must take the consequence. Come, my friend," continued he, taking the arm of the Duke, "let us leave him to his own reflections. Thank God we are none of us answerable for the faults of our children, and it would indeed be sad if you and I were to break friendship that has lasted half a century on account of this foolish folly of an inconsiderate boy." "It would indeed," returned the Duke, "and it would have broken my heart to have quarrelled with my darling Edmund. But yet it is hard in my time of life to be disappointed in one's fondest hopes." As he walked away with Sir Ambrose, the tears actually streamed down his cheeks. Both Edric and Rosabella were affected, but wisely considered that they could say nothing likely to allay the storm. They remained silent while the old men had gradually disappeared. I did not hear the sound alert. Did it play? Oh, crap. I had the light turned off. Sorry about that. Oh. This is starting to sound more and more like a Shakespearean romance. Because the Duke wanted the wrong pairs together. Yeah. Okay.
Only 10:38. Should I do another chapter? Hmm. I don't know how long the chapters are. The downside about this one. Ooh, let's see. Oh. There's poetry in the next chapter, I think. Okay, so next chapter is 15 pages. What say you, chat? As we've done chapters. Starting chapter 3. We're going into chapter 6. So we've done math. No. Doing the voice of an indignant princess has been interesting. I'm not sure if my voice could handle another chapter of Indignant Princess. Why is that music so loud? Let's see who might be on to raid. Dun, 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 dun. Ow! My jaw just popped. Oh, I see someone. Yup, so we go to the right window. Yeah, I got the skitty. Pick and choose whichever raid message you prefer. What is... Oh! Yeah, for them. Going to Red Heart Griffin. Ouch. So I will hopefully see you all tomorrow for some fairy tales. We'll finally be getting into the Brown Fairy book. Have a good night.